My co-founder, Joel Jackson, Tony Robbins and Diamandis, we all started talking, and our point of view was that one of the biggest things that gets in the way for people at the moment is just the level of fragmentation that people have to go through in order to put together an optimization program that's actually effective and is actually safe and sustainable.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Dugal Bain-Kim, CEO of Lifeforce. In this episode, we talk about enhancing well-being after age 35, how Dugal teamed with Tony Robbins and Dr. Diamandis to start Lifeforce, and we discuss the company's vision for a digital health optimization clinic. Let's get into it. Hi, Dugal. Welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Joe. Thanks a lot. It's great to be here. Your show's gotten me through a lot of long hours of LA traffic, so it's exciting to see you.
Yeah, I appreciate you tuning in and excited to have you now on as a guest. We were kind of talking a little bit offline. Selfishly, an area that I'm interested in terms of health optimization, human performance, and really just kind of not throwing your hands up and saying, once I reach a certain age in life, things are just going to play out. So from a longevity side, a lot to talk about, but kicking things off, why don't you give us a little bit about your background and tell us about Lifeforce?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So I'm Dugal Bain. I'm one of the co-founders of Lifeforce. And Lifeforce's mission is to improve quality of life for people 35 and beyond. So we basically look at this period of life and we think that there's a real opportunity to make health optimization easier for people, to give a single solution that allows people to track how their bodies are actually functioning, then get the right expertise and the right tools to move themselves into a zone where they feel good, where they can think clearer and feel stronger and ultimately live longer. So that's really what we focused on. We launched earlier this year and have had an awesome first year. And I think this idea of one membership, one solution to make it easier to, as you said, be more proactive about how you live is really exciting to folks so far.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time just in terms of these topics. You see folks like Andrew Huberman or Peter Attia and different folks. And of course, in this case with Lifeforce, Tony Robbins and Dr. Diamandis, who are involved as co-founders. So it's coming to the forefront. And I think, I wouldn't say into the mainstream, but certainly in different kind of like subcultures around like, hey, how do we really focus on longevity and beyond, whether that's health span or lifespan, right? And when it comes to all the different ways that you could potentially improve that, how did you look at it at Lifeforce and say like, oh, these are the kind of products or services or support that we're going to offer, and like that's why the rationale behind those paths kind of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So about a year and a half ago, a group of folks came together to look at this space around health optimization and talk about, what are the biggest problems that need to be solved in order for this to break out and become something that's available, not just for folks with a lot of money and connections, but average health conscious people who want to take control of their health. And so I was part of that. My co-founder, Joel Jackson, Tony Robbins and Diamandis, who are two of the biggest influencers in optimizing life and using health to do that. And then M13, which you've had Courtney Ream on the show before. M13 is a VC based in LA that does a lot of direct-to-consumer healthcare and sort of disruptive consumer technologies. So we all started talking, and our point of view was that one of the biggest things that gets in the way for people at the moment is just the level of fragmentation that people have to go through in order to put together an optimization program that's actually effective and is actually safe and sustainable. And so our point of view is that there are certain things that you need to combine in order to do this well. It starts with the right diagnostics and a proper, really robust data set so you truly understand, are you actually healthy and where do you have opportunities for improvement? Then it starts with the right expertise as well. So having great data is awesome, but if you don't have actual clinicians who are trained in optimization, have those right certifications and experience, then the data is only as good as the quality of the interpretation. And then you need a really broad toolkit. And so that means bringing together all of these different things that span supplements and pharmaceuticals and lifestyle changes so that you're not sort of hamstrung by only having a very narrow set of recommendations to make. So you actually have a broad toolkit that you can use to truly customize people's programs. That's part of the platform we've developed, is that broad toolkit. And then I think the thing it sits on top of is the right sort of spine of feedback loops for people so they know whether or not it's working. And so what actually happens with the Lifeforce experience is we start by sending a phlebotomist to your house to draw your blood. We understand how you're doing across the 40 different biomarkers that drive mental and physical performance. Our doctors use that. They also use what you've told us around how you're feeling and what your goals are, next year and decades in the future. We put together a plan for you that could include lifestyle changes, supplements, bioidentical hormones, peptides, other prescription tools. And then from there, you start your program, you work with a personal health coach, you work with your functional medicine doctor, and we actually retest every 3 months. So I think that retesting cadence is really important, because I think one of the things people struggle with a lot is this sense of, I want to take control of my health, but I'm not really sure what's working and what's not. And so, we want to create something that's it's more of like an objective source of truth for, this is what's working in the plan. And over time, these are new things that are happening in your body we should pay attention to.
Yeah, in terms of how it's structured now, is that a membership that someone's purchasing, and then there's kind of like the paths or ancillary products and services, there are additional fees, or how is that kind of laid out from the consumer side?
Yeah, so the first step in the process is to complete the Lifeforce diagnostic. And so that's really a baseline to know where you're starting from. So that's $349. That includes the phlebotomist visiting your house. It includes the program, the results. It also includes an actual telehealth consult with one of our Lifeforce functional medicine docs. So that's the first step, that diagnostic. And then from there, people can become members. And the membership is $129 per month, which covers ongoing access to the clinical team, a personal health coach, and the 3 monthly retesting. And then whatever specific products are in someone's program that they want to move ahead with, that's cost on top of that membership.
Yeah. And I think to the point you were making initially, like just how fragmented everything is. And even, you take someone like myself, for example, fairly, plugged in terms of what's happening, the different companies that might exist, the different options, some of the research. And I feel like looking at it, I oftentimes wonder, like, am I doing the right things? Am I doing too many of the wrong things? And like, even if I think I'm making the right choices, it seems like in some respects we're moving further away from a solution, just in terms of how confusing or contradictory some of the different recommendations may be. So making it turnkey, right? Bringing all these experts together, helping somebody make sense of that, obviously super important and really, really valuable. I guess a question I have is, how much of it is lifestyle driven, in terms of these are the recommendations, getting someone's sleep right, getting their diet right, getting their physical activity right, and then thinking about supplementation and potentially pharmaceuticals and things on top of that.
You've talked about this on the show before, but there's definitely a phenomenon of people wanting to jump to the quick fix without having some other fundamentals sorted out. And so when we were designing Lifeforce and what we thought we needed to offer, lifestyle interventions and lifestyle coaching was just always an important piece of it, because, again, we never wanted to be in a position where all we do is offer hormone optimization, for example, and therefore the incentives of the company are sort of all out of alignment. We want to be able to meet people with what they need, so that, as an example, if someone comes to us and they're in their mid 30s, and we actually think that optimizing their sleep and optimizing their diet can drive pretty good impact over the next 3 to 5 years, then we have the tools to do that. We have the expertise to do that with them. If someone comes to us and their biomarkers show us that, their real opportunities are in areas where great prescription products that are safe and FDA approved will have the biggest impact, then we can meet them with that, as well as the lifestyle coaching as well. So we launched broad, and that was very intentional, so that we had that flexibility.
Yeah. And then in terms of, you mentioned the retesting, I think every 3 months, which is a huge piece of the puzzle, right? That feedback loop in terms of what's happening. Is this working? How do I know? What do I do next? All those things. What role, if any, are wearables playing, or just tracking, health tracking in general? I've talked to a variety of folks, and some say, you know what, they're kind of nice to have. It's good ancillary data, just in terms of accountability and insight into kind of physical activity and sleep and things like that. And then some that have said the data is not in depth enough. We need these biomarkers from like a blood test perspective and very specific blood tests at that to be able to make any type of decisions down the path of like hormones, for example. So, what role maybe your wearables playing now, and is it working? Is it not working from your perspective?
We see wearables as a really important part of where we're headed. And it's something that we're going to be focusing on in 2023 because you're right that I think what a lot of people experience is that wearables give you a lot of interesting information that stops one step short of getting to the real deep metrics around what are the biomarkers that drive performance and longevity. And so bringing those things together means that you can tell a much more complete story about what's happening in someone's life and therefore make it easier for them to make better decisions. And so you think of something just as an example like hormone balance. Yes, it's great to understand from a blood test what your hormone levels are. That's it. That's a huge piece of the puzzle that most people aren't aware of. But if we can take that a step further and also match that with what your aura ring tells us around your sleep quality, for example, we know there's a big relationship between sleep quality and hormones. So you start to be able to tell people much more accurately, okay, you slept less in the last month. We see this come through in your cortisol level and your testosterone level. Let's get you a sleep coach. Let's also get you some magnesium into your supplement routine to help with relaxation and sleep. And so it takes it to this next level from sort of static insights to actually pattern recognition that allows people to make much better decisions. So for us, that's definitely a core part of the vision.
Would you say, as you're describing it, and to this point, and obviously reading up on Life Force, and as you mentioned, knowing Courtney from M13 a little bit, there's definitely the focus on the health optimization and longevity piece that goes to it. But hearing you talk about it, there's a lot of this just like health optimization concierge aspect. Do you think of that way in terms of like, hey, we want to give somebody that coach or that point of contact or that kind of level of service that whatever they need, we'll be able to steer them towards in terms of these interventions. And then potentially, you said started kind of broad, but maybe evolving that over time as you're hearing from folks, oh, we are having more issues with sleep. We are having more issues with you name it, and then be able to provide that on top.
Yeah, it comes back to the things that we keep hearing. And we've always heard since we started planning this around the biggest blockers for people to do this and have this in their lives. And convenience was the top one. It's not a problem, at least we don't believe it's a problem in motivation. We think there is a paradigm shift that's already underway around people realizing that health means more than just not being sick. Health means actually having the health resources to live your highest quality life, the energy, the recovery, the self esteem to show up in the best way for the things you love to do and the people around you. And that awareness is growing really quickly, but the convenience piece hasn't existed because it's been so fragmented. So that's part of it. And having a high touch experience, having it feel more like a concierge experience, either digitally or with our team, is just a big part of lowering that barrier so more people can take advantage of this. So that's certainly a big thing we think about. And then the other piece is just demonstrating impact. And kind of like what we were talking about before with the testing, our goal is to understand the things we should be measuring, measure the things that matter, and be able to move them either in terms of how people feel subjectively or what we actually see in their biomarker information or their wearables data and the other things we'll expand into. And so it's basically like this golden rule that if we can't actually demonstrate quantifiable impact, then we shouldn't be offering it on the platform. And all of that sort of stitching together of the data is something that we want to do on the back end while keeping the front end experience very simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of when you think about, you talked about the diagnostics and even that convenience piece, like I have done a variety of diagnostics where it's okay, now you have to go to the blood whatever clinic nearest you, and I have to find that, and I have to drive there, then I have to wait there, and just that piece I think is pretty huge in terms of being able to bring that to the customer. But as you review those diagnostics, they go down the kind of program. It seems like kind of supplement recommendations as part of that are sold through the website, and then more prescription based kind of hormone optimization and pharmaceuticals on the other side. How are you thinking about like moving somebody from the initial onboarding, recommending supplements, and then getting to the point where it's, hey, we've arrived at kind of diagnostics, the hormones, and which kind of treatments are offered at this point?
It's not necessarily inevitable that anyone ends up with pharmaceuticals or even that anyone starts on nutraceuticals. The way we've designed it is that if you have an optimization program, it should be dynamic in the same way that your life is dynamic and your biology is dynamic over time as well. So, depending on what's happening in someone's life, we can pull from the toolbox that includes hormones, peptides, prescription products, as well as nutraceuticals, and sort of drop them in and out of someone's program to match what they need at that point in time. Some of these things that we're measuring are naturally things that decline over time from about the age of 35. So as you get older, the level of support you need increases and we can meet you there as well. But for us, it was more about flexibility and what tools do we feel like we need in order to move the things that matter versus having any sort of preconceived notion of, where we want to get people to on their program. It's actually been really interesting because we're collecting all this information through the diagnostic and then every 3 months, it allows us to use that to like inform what our product roadmap should be over time as well. And so we see already from the few thousand people that are with us, when people come to us, of those 40 biomarkers that we're currently testing, about 25% of them are out of the optimal range at the moment. And so we can use that to start to identify themes, and that informs the future roadmap and what we need either in physical products or what we need in coaching and other forms of support for people.
Yeah, and I think probably important to point out, maybe that was phrased poorly, not necessarily moving people to different products, treatments, but kind of qualifying for them for specific things, thinking about, hey, we want to evaluate this versus that. And at this point, if you're out of the optimal range or even healthy range, maybe we would look at these other kind of treatments, pharmaceuticals, et cetera. So yeah, your answer kind of spoke to that more poignantly than my question.
Yeah, and that's a really good point because we are at an interesting sort of time in this space generally because you're seeing a lot of direct to consumer solutions pop up, which is generally a really great thing because it's all about increasing access. But I do think it's really important for any company in this space to also do it with the right level of clinical oversight and be conservative around what you're recommending, frankly. And so that was one of the reasons we wanted to have such a broad diagnostic. It's also one of the reasons why you need the membership in order to be on a prescription program because that allows us to have a doctor working with you, give you the right level of clinical oversight to do this safely and sustainably. So we think that building a brand that's based on things like that, that's based on science, it's based on clinical depth. We think that's a great opportunity commercially, but we also just think it's the right way to do health optimization.
It's interesting when you kind of zoom out and look at the expansion, especially during COVID, but of telehealth in general, and now down these specific kind of direct to consumer paths where you have this and mental health, and you're getting maybe an over prescription of Adderall or Ritalin and some of those treatments. And then you're starting to see a controversy brewing with some of the obesity medications, basically direct to consumer weight loss injections, and whether insurance is going to cover that and who should qualify for it, and are people maybe abusing it that aren't actually overweight to the extent that they need something like that. It's also just even in personal experience when I've talked about, hey, I'm going to go get my hormone levels checked and potentially consider, I haven't to this point, but have looked into it, and in conversation people being like, so you're doing steroids, like, so you're like, is that healthy? Or maybe like the clinic, whatever, locally that offer it, people are kind of sketched out like, oh, do you need to be going and getting that type of thing? What do they do in there? Do you think that there's a stigma around some of the either hormone treatments or even this idea of optimization in general, of like, who's paying for it? Does it work? Why do you need it? And is that something you're running into and thinking about even having to combat?
Yeah, I think there is still some stigma, and it's not all unjustified either. This is something that, like any good quality medicine, it needs to be managed so that you, as the consumer, is really put in choice with full information around what's most effective for you, a truly personalized recommendation, what are the risks, what are the returns, and have the right level of support so you can make a really well informed decision. And so, I think that what we're still working through is the last 10 or 20 years where that hasn't always been the bar that's existed in this space. I think that's changing a lot. I think companies like us and other great good actors in the space are starting to clean that up by investing in having the right doctors, having the right information, and tools that are safe and validated and actually do work, and showing people that. And so I think we're at a tipping point, and I think it's going to be something that brings people a lot of peace of mind. But what we've been hearing more and more from people is kind of similar to what you're saying of people understand now that there's a better way to feel, that feeling average through their 30s, 40s, 50s is not something they just have to shrug their shoulders about. But they also just want a trusted guide. They don't want to go out there and have to kind of sort through what's snake oil and what's credible and who can they trust and who they can't. They're really craving a place where they can have that peace of mind. And that's definitely what we're trying to build. And it's been exciting to see other companies building brands based more around that as well.
Yeah, with this, the interest growing, the kind of acknowledgement that I don't have to feel this way, or I hear a lot is like, something's off. I don't know what it is. And anytime I go to the doctor, they basically write me off. Like they just, hey, yeah, you're getting older. That's what it is. Or like, oh, yeah, you're stressed. Like that, you probably expect something like that, which is infuriating. With that, you talk about trying to have that kind of clinical and scientific oversight, good actors in the space. How do you balance that with actually running the business in terms of we got to acquire customers, we have to reach people, we have to do some level of marketing around this? What has worked, maybe what hasn't worked in terms of reaching people and conveying that message such that they're even willing to try the diagnostic?
Yeah. One great advantage we have is the fact that we have Tony Robbins and Peter Diamandis as co-founders of the company. And so Peter and Tony have huge audiences, of course, but they also have a really deep level of trust within their communities around strategies to improve your life and ways to use new technologies to really continue to show up in the way that you want to. So that's been fantastic for us in our first year because it's allowed us to get this message out to just a broader section of the community and more people than most young companies are able to do. So that's been great from an acquisition perspective. But then there are other channels as well that have been surprisingly effective even in a relatively early company. So we think about referral channel, for example, and this is a sort of product that really lends itself to a pretty powerful referral network if we can demonstrate impact. And it all comes back to whether or not we can actually show it's working. But if you're on a Lifeforce program and your energy is feeling better, you have lost some weight, your biomarkers are improving, and we can show you that, and you've developed these good relationships with your doctor and with your performance coach, then why wouldn't you want your spouse, your parents, your friends to explore this as well? So that's been really cool to see just sort of on a organic basis, and we haven't done too much to cultivate that. The other thing that we've been starting to dip our toe into more, and we're definitely going to do more in this channel in the next few months, is influencers. And so we have a relationship off and running with Max Lugavere and his Genius Life podcast. Scotty Upshaw has also been a great supporter for us as well. So we really want to identify people who are aligned in how we think about optimization and have that level of trust with their communities. And we think that'll be another big tailwind for us.
And thinking about, continuing to grow this, obviously you talk about like, hey, we have to show that it's working, and then that organically drives some of the referrals and will continue to propel the business. Whether it's on an individual basis or kind of collectively, how do you think about defining success? Like, what is it's working that people anecdotally feel better, that their biomarkers have improved, that they're continuing to subscribe, and or some combination of maybe those metrics and more?
Yeah. I think it all comes back to, can we demonstrate that our programs are effective for people? And there's two main ways that we would measure that. One is in how people are feeling. So we actually ask people when they start off with us, how are you feeling about your energy? How's your sleep quality? How's your libido? All of these subjective things that when rolled up represent quality of life and represent whether someone's really feeling at their best or just kind of slugging along. And what we've seen is that 85% of the people who've been on a Life Force program improve that quality of life measure within 3 months, which is super encouraging and really exciting for our team, especially because optimization is a multi-quarter journey. It's not something that happens totally within one quarter, but we do need to demonstrate impact, so we earn the right to have a long relationship with people. The subjective feeling better side has been really exciting. And then on the biomarker information, which is the other big data set, we've had really good results in being able to move these important things for people quickly. And that's a combination of things that are sort of more narrow, I'll think of DHEA, for example, which is, hormone really important in mood, body fat, energy, all that kind of thing. We're seeing a 200% increase in people's DHEA when they are suboptimal into optimal ranges within 3 months. So that's great. That's almost like a sort of more one-to-one relationship between an intervention we can deliver and a biomarker. But then we're also seeing other things like HSCRP, for example, which is kind of a wonky biomarker not many people have heard of, but it's actually really important for measuring inflammation and risk of heart attack and stroke. And what we've seen is a 25% reduction in HSCRP for people who came to us with elevated levels. So we love to geek out on that stuff, and we spend a lot of time internally on it, but it really means that it's like an example of, by doing these things you can improve quality of life but also increase longevity in the future, and put people in a better position for the decades ahead. And so if we do that, then everything else comes from there in terms of retention and acquisition and the way we grow the business.
Yeah, it's as you're talking about it too, I'm sure there's a struggle with how are we conveying basically these results, this data to customers? Like, what do we show them? I mean, obviously you're making it all available to them, but in terms of interpreting it or how you're coming to the various conclusions or what you're measuring, this happens a lot of times with like wearables. It's so overwhelming. And like, I don't know what to do with this information. How do I make it actionable? How do I know if it's improving? Have you begun to create any type of framework or best practices in terms of like, this is what we're educating people on, this is how we're communicating to them about this data, where they want to be in these ranges? And yes, hopefully they're making those improvements in their health and the metrics, but also like they're understanding and learning like why this is happening.
hmm We continue to remind ourselves about simplicity, and we believe that the companies that do best in this space will be the ones that simplify as much as possible for people, and really distill down all of this information to just the essential things people need to know. Because by doing that, folks can retain more and actually stick with the program. And so I think that we've gone through this interesting pendulum swing where maybe 10 years ago it was hard to get information. It was hard to get your hands on diagnostics and things like that. I think now it's almost like the opposite problem, where there's so much information around and people are overwhelmed. And the best thing we can do is continue to push ourselves to make it more and more simple. And I sort of use the analogy of driving a car. If I'm driving my car, I sort of always know generally how the car's doing because I have a dashboard in front of me that shows me, do I have any gas? How are the revs? Are there any warning lights? And I'm not a huge car guy. I don't really need to go deeper than that. I just want to know that the car seems to be performing well. And if something breaks or there's something I need to pay attention to, show me the alert and I'll take it in to get serviced. That's always a good analogy for us in thinking about, how do you build that master dashboard? How do you give people those controls in front of them that are super simple, that they can pull out of their pocket and show to their friends, and it gives a snapshot of the things they should be paying attention to. And then anything sort of more sophisticated and deeper, let people dig into that if they want to, but that's really more stuff that we use to make the right recommendations on the back end.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. The description there in terms of that insight, that level of understanding, and then certainly the warning signs. You know, if that check engine light comes on or the air pressure's low, I'm right there too. I'm like, just tell me if I need to fix it or if I need to need to be aware of it. I don't need to, open the hood and dig around and figure it out myself. Yeah, that resonates a lot with me, and I think listeners as well. As we get toward the end of the conversation, kind of recognizing that you are early, you mentioned in terms of the company getting started this year, and I think it's interesting to think about the space in terms of going deeper maybe into the health optimization and longevity, or expanding to kind of treat other conditions or ailments, and offering different products and services down those paths. Or even, the idea we've seen with telemedicine in general, a brand starting out, for example, targeting hair loss, and now does everything across the span of a modern kind of healthcare clinic. Have you, I'm sure you've thought about, but to the extent that you're thinking about it and talking about it with the team in terms of the roadmap, is that too far off in terms of planning and thinking about it? Or do you have an ambition of specializing or expanding or building health optimization clinic, for example, digitally?
We do definitely have a lot of thoughts on that. We launched with, what we consider is a really strong first version of that health optimization virtual clinic, but there's a lot that we can expand really in all of these verticals we've talked about. So on the diagnostics front, for example, we mentioned wearables. There's other types of diagnostics, DNA mutations, microbiome. There's a whole set of things that are really important for us to be able to leverage to fully understand how people are doing, and are really useful things for people to understand themselves if we can communicate it in a simple way. So, adding more of that information in is definitely something that we're going to be doing from here. And then on the actual sort of tool side, we will continue to roll out other parts of health optimization that we think are important if we're going to be comprehensive. So, as an example, we launched female hormone optimization for pre and perimenopause about 5 months ago. That's been an awesome addition. 45% of our members are female. Everything we offer is for men and women. We're just about to launch sexual function and products and support related to that. So we have a roadmap of when we basically take a piece of paper and say, all right, if we were to be your one-stop shop for living at your best through this stage of life, what are the problems we'd need to be able to help you with? And we're sort of chipping our way through being able to handle those things. And then, underneath it is a lot of work on the digital product and data science side around taking all that information and starting to create ways to automate that and use that to sort of give our clinicians more tools, but also, lower price, make things even more accessible to folks in this country.
Yeah, it's probably a loaded, maybe involved question, but to the extent that you've thought about it down that path, is it for obviously in the United States, for example, a lot more people are, kind of unwell in terms of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, chronic conditions in general. But at the same time, there is this movement towards an interest in health optimization and kind of the belief that, hey, this can improve how we live our lives. And hopefully we don't go down the path of chronic ailments, or maybe we could reverse them and so on and so forth. Do you think it's going to continue to be kind of this gap between, or maybe kind of the barbell, right? At one end, there's going to be a growing portion of the population who's unwell and dealing with these various ailments. And then at the other end, there's going to be kind of a group of people who are actually trying to do the exact opposite in terms of wanting to live longer, seeking out, treatments in clinics like Lifeforce, et cetera? Or is there ever a world in which the tide turns, right? And it's like, no, we are steering things in the direction of like living optimally.
I think that unfortunately there will always be some of that polarity for sure. I think that's not going to go away in the foreseeable future. But what I am optimistic about is that the space in the middle can start to become more blurred as you see traditional primary care start to become sort of more aware of optimization and different training and different experience for folks practicing there. I think that's a real opportunity to start having earlier conversations and, weaving in more this way of thinking around let's get ahead of how you're doing, let's put you on the right path early on and, be more proactive versus waiting until something's broken to fix it. I think there is real reason to be optimistic there, and I think that can have an effect on a lot of people if that middle space starts to become blended between, primary care and optimization based healthcare. I think we also see this just in the number of doctors who are doing additional training and certifications in things like functional medicine and integrated medicine. When you look at, the two biggest certification groups in that space, they've seen a 10x increase in the last 10 years. So something's happening, not just from a consumer perspective, but from docs as well. And that's really encouraging because the more docs who have this training and have this mindset, then the more people have access to this sort of conversation.
Yeah, it's almost like we have to keep pushing and remain optimistic down that path. Like, yes, do everything that we can to treat chronic conditions and prevent them to begin with and help people live a healthier lifestyle. But it's also pushing the kind of boundaries at the opposite end in terms of innovation or research or access, to your point, to like blur that middle ground where it's like, yes, we know what to do about this. We can move it more into the mainstream, into healthcare in general. So it is actual healthcare and not sick care or even optimization. It's one of the things I think is is always interesting when, even based on the doctor you go to, you get lab results back, and kind of my PCP will be like, "Yep, everything's great. Like you're in all the normal ranges." And then I'll go to kind of more optimization clinic route, and they're like, "Yeah, for the ranges that exist now, which are suboptimal based on like the vast majority of the population, but that doesn't mean it's good. That just means it's average, right? Or normal." So I think even kind of shifting the definition of like what is a normal range or what is an optimal range. Yeah, there's a lot of kind of progress there.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
and
that's
it,
a huge piece of it. I had the same experience. After my daughter arrived, all my routines were crash bombed, and I went through a lot of the things young parents do with weight gain and sleep quality and everything like that. I tried to find out what was going on. This is before we started Lifeforce, and it was a really rough, really expensive, time-consuming journey. And I had a lot of those conversations of people saying, "Okay, your vitamin D is at 30. That's totally fine." In reality, most people feel better at 50 or 60, and that's just not a conversation that I had. And I think you've talked about on the show around trickle down optimization, and I'm a believer that these things eventually make their way into mainstream practice. But we know that it takes about 17 years for something, a breakthrough to make it from clinical research into clinical practice. And I think the role that companies like us can play is shortening that, like being the catalyst to give more people access earlier to things that we know actually are the future, rather than having to wait, so long for it to be something that most people's lives are improved by.
yeah, certainly a lot of work to do over the next 17 years and beyond. But I appreciate you making some time to kind of give us the update here today, talk about not only what you're working on at Lifeforce, but just in general around the idea of health optimization and what's kind of coming down the pipeline. For folks who are interested, want to check it out, want to learn more, where would you point them?
Sure. So I'm on LinkedIn at Dugal Bain-Kim, and you can find us on Instagram at Go Lifeforce. We're at mylifeforce.com. That's where you can go to understand more about the membership. Would also love to invite folks listening to this to try out the membership. You can use the code FITT, so Fitt FITT, and that'll get you 20% off the diagnostic, which is a good first step. It'll just really let you know, are you healthy? How are you going? And we'll take it from there.
Perfect. Yeah, I appreciate you doing that. We'll get that in the show notes as well, and encourage people to check it out, reach out, learn more. And like I said, appreciate you making some time today.
Cool. Thanks, Joe. This was fun.